Yeah. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. My name is Rabbi Mark Rodenberg, and I am the minister to the community here at Recovery Boot Camp. And this is our fifth installment of RBC's and the Schnellenberg Family Foundation's presentation of Basic Training Family Edition. And I just want to say I'm glad that those of you that have come late have gotten interested, and those of you that started off with us in the beginning, 4 episodes ago, I commend you for, I don't know, your stick-to-itiveness and your desire. And I was reviewing a lot of the questions that were on just the reasons that you came, and I saw a general trend. And the trend is, oddly enough, about information education and how to participate in your own recovery and an extent to your loved one's recovery vis-a-vis having boundaries and enabling. And I will tell you that we are just to get into that. This night we're going to have a different topic. We're in our section, and then probably for the next 2 weeks we're going to spend an in-depth explanation of how treatment happens for the client and what you can look for, and then by extension understanding your own treatment, and then we will move into your process and how to distinguish between boundaries, enabling, and all that stuff. But before we get into it, I'd like to introduce Dave again, my amazing executive producer and colleague, and he's going to come up and say his pitch.
Hey everybody, welcome back. We're glad you're all here. I just come out here every week for anyone that's new and just go over some of the technical issues regarding being on a webinar and the internet and all that confusing, hard to follow stuff sometimes. So if you guys look at your chat box, first and foremost, you're going to see a few things that I've posted in there. Just wanted to review each one. The first thing I posted is Nick Johnson's information. He is our Director of Admissions, Director of Communications. So really, if you are, I mean, you know, if there's anybody you know, if you have a loved one or a friend, somebody that's seeking treatment and you don't know where to send them or who to call, Nick is a really great resource. He's really good about answering the phone. You're always going to get Nick when you call him. You can also shoot him an email. I put his email on there as well. Any questions you may have regarding treatment or someone coming into treatment or looking to place someone in treatment. The second link that I posted is for our webinars, the past ones. If this is your first time with us, or if you've missed any of Rabbi Mark's previous episodes of the webinar, you can click on that link. It will take you to our website where you'll be able to see all previous webinars listed, as well as all the handouts that we provide for you guys. So that's just a really good way. If you have to leave early, hopefully you don't, but if you do, we do understand. Just make sure you go back to our website and catch what you missed. Or if there's any webinars you haven't gotten to see yet, you can sit down and watch them at your leisure. It's a pretty cool thing. The last thing that I put up there, and I'm sure Rabbi Mark is going to speak a little bit about it, is a link to our Family Weekend program. And that is something that we have started here where we have our all of our clients who are currently at Recovery Boot Camp. We have a weekend dedicated to the family, where the family is able to come down and do some intense work with their loved one and with Rabbi Mark. It's done offsite in a hotel. It's really interactive, and we're really excited about it. So I'm sure he'll tell you a little bit more about that as well. The last thing I wanted to say is we love questions. We love questions from you guys. We know that there's a lot of information that we cover and also a lot of things that you guys are interested in learning about. So my job while Rabbi Mark is schooling everybody up with his knowledge is to be sitting at my computer answering as many questions as I can. I gear my answers more towards the technical things. If you can't find the handouts, if you can't hear, those kind of questions. But we welcome all sorts of questions because at the end of each session, Rabbi Mark does a Q&A, 10, 15 minutes, depending on how the flow of the webinar is going. So please, by all means, send me your questions. Utilize your question box. Send me all the questions you have. We'll get to as many as we can live at the end of the webinar. Anything we don't address, we will take care of getting back to you via email after the webinar is over. So I think that's all I got. Rabbi Mark, you ready to take over again?
Let's do it.
All right, guys, enjoy.
Hey, everybody. So Dave actually mentioned the family weekend, and I just wanted to tell you a little bit about that. That was really, I mean, the genesis of the Family Foundation, of the Schnellenberger Family Foundation, was to create this space. And it is actually a at no cost, free of charge thing where we actually, the foundation, flies the parents down. We put them up for free. We feed them, the hotel, and then we have these things. And just to give you a little rundown, generally what we do is starts on a Friday. There's at that time early, if you come in early, there are family sessions with the therapist for each individual. Then we have a big meet and greet. We eat, and then there's a Al-Anon meeting, which is a beginners open and Al-Anon meeting, and it is follows the guidelines. It doesn't violate traditions of Al-Anon World Services. We always have a speaker. Then we break up in the evening, and you can hang out during the day on Saturday. It's a full day of curriculum and interactive play, where we start with addiction and knowledge assessments. Everyone fills out an assessment. We can find out what they want to work on personally, and then we get into really the brass tacks of it. We talk about the journey of the family through their own recovery that is paralleled with the client's recovery. Then we go on, and that's a good block at a time. And then there's lunch with the clients. The family gets to go and interact with the client. Then we get into parents and family and the basic difficulties facing families. We talk at length about enabling and creating boundaries specific to the family's individual needs. Then we address compassionate communication, how to start and develop communication between the client and the parents, because both of them have to heal in this area. And then the clients have dinner with the family. We adjourn for the day, and then the family goes with the client to an AA meeting to see how AA works with their child in tow, or vice versa. And Sunday we have an educational program again in the morning, and we do an impact kind of a group where you get to write the impact statements. You get to bring them to the client. It's a multifamily context where you and the client are in therapy that is moderated by facilitators to interact, to really work some stuff out. Then we conclude, and there's questions and answers at length for a few hours, and that's the whole weekend. And it's one of the most amazing things that I do. It's really, I don't know, I'm super passionate about it. I love it. That interaction really just gets me going. Speaking of things that get me going, tonight our topic is about spirituality. We are in that section of the recovery model. We're going to talk about the malady, spiritual approaches, spirituality in general. We got a lot of information. We only have a few slides, but we're jam-packed with stuff. And it's odd because what we look at in AA or NA or any of the 12-step fellowships is we have a paradigm of 12 steps. It is cognitive in nature. But the most important thing is to look at the very beginning of the last step. And it says, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. Not a result, the way it's spoken many times, but the result. A singular individual goal, a singularity of purpose. And the result is in essence the goal. If I strive for this thing, it becomes my motivator to attain it. So really, it's a circular idea from step 1 to step 2 and back again, with the entire premise and the entire change in my consciousness, in my personality, is on a spiritual level. And this is my wheelhouse, and I love this. But what I find is that spirituality it's talked about and the term is used often, but a lot of times there's a lot of conflicting ideas of what it is. And we're going to try and get on the same page in terms of definition with this. So let's start with the fact that, just a super quick review, we started last week or the week before about the recovery model in specific, in depth. And we covered the physical allergy, the way the body reacts, the metabolic reaction, how that's an integral part of the disease. We talked about the mental obsession. I gave that convoluted speech that if you're an alcoholic, you completely understand, but everybody else was like, I don't even know what he's saying. And that's a factor too. And these things are interrelated and integrated, right? And we also mentioned that those two particular facets of the disease go into complete and utter remission, right? And the reason that they do is because they are a direct result of the pathology of protracted use over a period of time. Excuse me. And so now, at the very end of last week, we asked a poll question. And that was a simple question. How many of you believe that you may be experiencing a crisis of faith, whether it's in your scientific approach or your religious context, but you feel struggling with those ideas that you had held? And the results we got were amazingly split evenly. So let's get into the first slide. All in depth, right? And let's look at our first idea, the spiritual malady. So what is a spiritual malady? It is a spiritual sickness, right? And that means that it's spiritual, it's nebulous, it's a little ethereal, it's hard to explain. People know what it is, but they can't really put it in words. But you understand that it's a sickness, that it's a problem. And the most critical part of that is that it never, ever goes into remission. So I have a three-pronged disease, a physical allergy. I abstain, goes into complete remission. A mental obsession. I abstain, also goes into complete remission. Only sometimes it may take a little longer because of the detoxification half-life of the metabolites in my brain. And as they slowly taper out and I reach that half-life point, I can have what's called a peak post-acute withdrawal, where my brain says to me, you know what, something's missing. We're used to this substance, and now it's getting critical. We're about to drop off past the halfway point. It doesn't tell me, oh, go out and get high or go out and drink. It says, I'm going to mess with your sleep patterns. I'm going to make you eat everything in the refrigerator, and the next day you're going to open and be nauseated by any particular thing. And then I'm going to make you have mood swings and jealousy and doubt and bouts of anger and loneliness in this kind of up-down pattern that's super annoying. The beauty is it lasts at the most 10 days. And what we do here at Recovery Boot Camp is we inform our clients specifically about when that window is going to be for them, because it's clinically trackable, because every single drug has a specific half-life chemically. And we prepare them for the onset of this. And by that time, they're already engaged in community. They have sponsees. Hopefully, they definitely have a sponsor. They're involved in the Society of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that brings them to a place of security and comfort when this attacks them. And they also know, listen, it's a short-term intervention from a negative point of view that's going to come at me because of my neurology. Great. So now we have this spiritual malady. So we got the physical allergy, complete remission. Mental obsession, complete remission. Well, if 2 out of 3 components of the disease go into complete remission, why do people relapse? And the reason is because the spiritual malady never goes into remission. It is only capable of treatment and symptom management. I have to address it continuously. Oddly enough, recovery occurs in that downward motion. The first thing to leave is the physical allergy. If I'm allergic to peanuts, I don't eat peanuts, no allergy. Then comes the mental obsession. It starts to fade, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. We spoke last week that an intense experience can actually facilitate the diminishment of that obsession. And what finally comes is the work on the spiritual malady. We see that the spiritual nature of a human being, it is the first thing to go. In other words, their moral caliber in using is the first thing to leave. In the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it calls it incomprehensible demoralization. The difference between a moral and an ethic is an ethic tends to be societally imposed. It's punitive in nature sometimes. It can be moderated and policed, if you will. Where morals are those standards that exist in us, either through training, education, family exposure, inculcation, but there are personal standards that we have. And what we find is that those are the things that we start to lose the first when we start to engage in an addictive pathology. It takes a while for the physical allergy to develop, for the mental obsession to develop, but initially we almost immediately start to lose our spiritual paradigm. Because what we end up doing, because we're humans and we have our own standard, what we do is we drop that standard before we can violate it, because the violation would be an existential crisis. So it's the first to go in use, and unfortunately, the last to return in recovery. And it's based in what we consider trauma. Now, I'm going to say something that may or may not be popular, and people may get very mad at me, but the truth is trauma is real, and it is not simultaneously. The events that are traumatic in nature that cause this type of pathology are absolutely real. However, if trauma is addressed in trauma therapy correctly, which is a very short-term work, and it's almost antithetical to the idea of our naturally occurring desire. Something bad happens, I don't think about it. I don't want to think about it. And I drink so I don't think about it. Oddly enough, the efficacy of trauma therapy is almost antithetical or counterintuitive to that idea. What I do is I force myself to actually remember those thoughts. I journal them. I start to bring clarity to the actual memory instead of just piecemealing it, because it's so infused by emotional things that I can actually come to the place where I can look at it objectively and process it therapeutically. And the clients here at RBC, at Recovery Boot Camp, we engage with this all the time, because trauma is not just for combat vets or first responders. Trauma is for every person that lives in a world where behavioral toxicity is a big part of their life. Anytime you go into bad neighborhoods or get involved in fights or drama with drug dealers, the truth is oddly enough, if I were to ask a group of clients how many of them have had a gun pointed at them in their life, it would be probably close to 70–80% consistently. Now, granted, it changes. However, we know that the national numbers vis-a-vis Americans in this country, 0.5%. So literally, our behavior and our lifestyle and addiction makes us 140, 200 times more likely to have a gun pointed at us, which means that we are engaged in trauma stimulating events consistently, and it's called behavioral toxicity. It's toxic and dangerous behavior. So when we talk about trauma as a spiritual diminisher, we have to talk about the idea of what is real and what is perceived trauma. And this is a very tricky area, because real trauma is perceived and perceived trauma is real. The truth is that the addict and the alcoholic, the client here at RBC, has a trauma that is real to them. Whether that trauma actually was connected to a true circumstance or situation that was dangerous or toxic really doesn't matter. What matters is they have owned that trauma perceptively. It becomes an ongoing perception for them. It creates a status of victimization for them where they are not at fault. Someone did it to them, or something did it to them, or the police did it to them. And once they attain that pure status of victimhood, they now become entitled to behave any way they please. And that is the rational patterning for most people to continue to diminish their moral standards. So trauma is real and perceived, and they're both actually equitable. And they all are inherently delusional. And I don't mean that it didn't happen. I mean that once we marinate on that thought in our head over and over and over again, where it becomes real, we start to believe that movie, where we remove our own responsibility for the circumstance. It inherently becomes a delusion, a fantasy, right? And we are uber capable of that as human beings, because we have a prefrontal cortex. And a prefrontal cortex is our conceptual part of our brain that allows us to contemplate our own existence and fantasize and project ideas and It allows us to read a book or watch a movie without being critical the entire time. And so even though we may see this as being a problem that is vaguely not real, for the addict himself, it becomes absolutely real and has to be treated with an absolute aggressive stance. So let's look. Now, did I miss a question, Dave? I did not. I was just checking. So let's look at the rest of the spiritual malady. So what we hear in modern parlance with exposure to recovery and group therapy is this idea of denial. And we talked about this last week. Don't even notice I am lying. That soft kind of huggy 70s group therapy vibe. Whereas what we know is the criteria put forth by Dr. Silkworth in the very first printing of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, which was suppositional until it was proven by Dr. Jelinek and the study he did at Harvard, and has been accepted over and over again by the NIH and the American Medical Association as the criteria for diagnosis of this particular brain disease. He's a little bit more aggressive, and he says that the diagnostic criteria for the alcoholic is not denial. It is that they are an outright mental defective, which is delusional in nature. And they are, in fact, in full flight from reality. They live in an altered state of consciousness. I always wanted to go over there and run there by getting high because that place just seemed better. And in that state, I am inherently unable to differentiate between true and false. So we covered these two slides last week, but I really wanted to bring it home. So now let's get into the heart and the meat of the idea of spirituality and the spiritual malady. So let's look at the first one, spiritual malady. So I'm going to leave that up there, and I'm going to ask you a poll question. And this is the poll question. Is spirituality the act of connecting to a higher power? I click on it after the answer goes away, right? Mm-hmm. Just reminding myself. Is spirituality, I'm doing air quotes right now, but you can't see them, the act of connecting to a higher power. It's great when you do air quotes and nobody's looking. I am an alcoholic. What are you going to say?
All right, results are in.
Results are in, and they are 75% of you say yes. Awesome. You guys are so good. You are absolutely incorrect. Just saying. So, what is it? Well, I don't know. Well, let's look at an actual definition, a clinical definition, let's say, or preferably one from the Oxford English Dictionary. So what we see is that there is an actual definition, even though it's nebulous and vague. And it's one of those terms that we use all the time, but it's so floaty that nobody really has a concrete idea. So let's talk about this. There is, in fact, a difference between spirituality and religion. So let me give you the Oxford English Dictionary. Oh, excuse me, its formal name. The Oxford Unabridged English Dictionary and Grammatical Lexicon, 2015 edition. And it says, and I quote, spirituality is having to do with deep feelings and beliefs about a person's sense of peace, purpose, connection to others, and their beliefs about the meaning of life, period. At times, these can be religious in nature. So what does that actually mean? Well, now that I read you the definition, let me ask you another poll question. Do you personally think that you now understand the difference between religion and spirituality? If I see a little extra animated tonight, it's because this is the section that it's kind of my wheelhouse. I like it a lot. I'm passionate about it. Sometimes it frightens people.
Results are in.
And the results are in, and 90% of you agree that you do know the difference. Awesome. So let's move on to the next slide. Yep, you got to click. Hold on. You know, it's hard to see the little arrowy thing when you first come back. So, spiritual malady. It is about how I feel and what I think about my own sense of peace, my own sense of comfort and serenity and happiness. What is my purpose in the moment, in the short term, in the mid-range, and in the long term? How do I fulfill that purpose as a social animal? By connecting to others. Because of my own power, I'm not very much. Me against the world never worked for me. And what does it all mean to me when I contemplate my existence? And at times, these can be religious in nature. There's a guy named Rabbi Twersky, who's a friend of mine, who started a treatment center years ago in Pittsburgh. And I used to watch him lecture. He's a great guy. And he always said this: you don't have to be religious to be spiritual. But as you travel the spiritual road, questions will inevitably arise that can only be answered or even understood in a religious context or through religious ideas. And he's right. A lot of those questions, we tend to bring religious theology and religious ideology in. So in essence, what we're talking about is really a spiritual malady is almost synonymous with existential angst. Oddly enough, the Oxford English Dictionary defines the word existential like this: having to do with a person's perception of reality, including deep feelings and beliefs about a person's sense of peace, purpose, connection to others, and their beliefs about the meaning of life and their place in it. In essence, it's a nearly identical thing. One of the biggest questions that we find in the addict's mind, in the addict's being, in the addict's existential angst is simply this: why am I an addict? So let me ask you the same question, another poll question. Do you think that you obsess about why your loved one is an addict? Oh, my screen went blank completely.
Move the mouse.
I did. It says enter password. Technical difficulties.
If you go in the top left corner, it'll trigger it.
Did I go on the top left corner? I must have. Yeah, I can't
All
see
right,
it.
results are in.
Results are in, and the results are about evenly split. So it's a question, and we see that. Is this going to pull off, Dave? Probably. So let's talk about it while the answer is still up. So you guys are about evenly split. I would say that concern is important, but obsession is detrimental. Because the truth is you have to be prudent. Prudent is concern without worry, vigilance, whereas obsession is driven by worry. And we talked about that. So when we were mentioning this idea of obsession, the obsession you have about the safety and how your loved one will fare is actually very similar to the same type of addiction. And so most addicts have this existential question of, why am I an addict? Why am I an addict? Why did this happen to me? Well, the answer is simple. And the answer simply is, where is the thingy? Oh, it's over here. There, I know it's over there. Okay. Answer is this. Who freaking cares? I know it sounds harsh, but the truth is, it doesn't actually matter. It doesn't actually matter. If I try to reverse engineer my life back to that single trigger point where I zigged instead of zagged, I'm going to be lost in woulda, shoulda, couldas for the rest of my life. The fact is that I have this reality. It is unequivocally my truth. And it may not, and it's not my fault I'm an addict. But now that I know, it is absolutely my obligation to get better. It doesn't actually matter. But what we do know is something that relates, because all the time and effort I spend asking why, there is one fact that eludes me. And that fact is that I fail to recognize my total inability to form a true partnership with another human being. Is that why I'm an addict? Or is it the result of being an addict? It's an awesome question. And this comes directly from step 4 in the 12 and 12 on page 53 in the 12 Steps and 12 Tradition book. And think about this. I can ask why I'm an addict all the time, but when I do that, I become so self-absorbed and so self-obsessed, and then couple that with my desire to get high all the time to relieve myself of the existential angst of that question, that I live in a family without being in the family or participating. And so I isolate myself even in the group through my self-absorption and self-pity. Next question. Again, same one. Again, my existential angst, my deepest question, why am I an addict? So let's jump. And really the reason that I brought that 4th step kind of thing in is when I engage, and when the clients here at Recovery Bootcamp really start to do a 4-step and really, drill down and figure out and learn the pathologies that are driven by fears that may have occurred when they were children, what comes to the surface is that in all of that, what was lacking is this ability to have a true relationship. Because if I inherently feel bad about myself for whatever reason, whatever trauma I have, real or perceived, makes me feel less than the rest of the world, then any relationship I have to have with somebody has to be predicated on who I want to be, or don't you know who I think I am, or who I want you to want me to be. And I then act according to that and don't bring my true authentic self to the table, and the relationship is bad and it's never intimate. After I do the 4-step, after the clients here at Recovery Bootcamp do a 4-step and they do a 5th step and that becomes elucidated and they want to be rid of these things in 6 and 7, they get ready to do the process of fixing the things they've broken, specifically in relationships. And they do that by generating a list in step 8. So let's go back to this idea of the spiritual problem, this spiritual angst, this malady, this unforgiving spiritual pain of why I'm an addict, and look at how do we start to fix that. And maybe in that particular reality, we may actually have an answer. So let me ask this question. If you have to ask the question, why is my loved one or anyone an addict? Then the answer is either there's no reason or there is a reason. What do you guys think? I'm talking to the camera like it's on.
Okay, the results are in, they're a little low. Maybe this one was hard to understand, so maybe explain a little bit.
All right,
Post
so-
the results.
Okay, so what I was asking is, so we asked this question, do you obsess about why you're an addict, why your loved one's an addict? And the addict themselves obsess about that. And so really the question is, if you have to have an answer, do you think it's there is no answer or there is? There is no reason or there is a reason? Because again, if we try to reverse engineer our life back to there is a reason and suss that out and fix that, you know, Freud would say, find that spot, fix it, you're good. You know, it's not that simple. So let's look at this. Why? Click it again. Why am I an addict? Ah, this is why I'm an addict. Defective relationships with other human beings have nearly always been the immediate cause of my woes, including my alcoholism. When I first read that, it baffled me. But what it actually says is there is a reason you are an addict. Because of the fear and the way you process trauma and anxiety and whatever your feelings are in terms of trauma, real or imagined, the result of that is that you become an alcoholic or an addict because you are inherently incapable of having a true relationship. What it says is that I don't have crappy relationships because I'm a drunk. I'm a drunk because I've never been capable of true, authentic relationships. I don't have bad relationships because I'm a drunk. I'm a drunk because I've never been able to have good relationships. And it's no one's fault. It's just the way it is for whatever reasons. And there are a myriad of them. So trying to find a singularity cause is really ridiculous because there are so many factors and so much input in my experience and my genetics and my inculcation and what I learned from my friends and things I believe in and things I don't believe. So much input, so much that goes into the perfect storm of making me who I am. All right, let's move on. Back to the spiritual melody. Back to the existential angst. Back to the question, why am I an addict? Why am I an alcoholic? I am an alcoholic because I have never been able to have good relationships. So I would suggest to you that if this is my true and common existential reality vis-a-vis pain and trauma for the addict and alcoholic, I know that all trauma, all perceived existential pain, all spiritual pain comes from a fear. So here's the question, another poll question. Do you believe that there is a single fear, single driving fear common to all addicts? Because everybody has different experiences. So maybe their fears are different. Or maybe they can be codified and classified as a single fear. Maybe. I don't know. What do you think?
Still getting some answers in. I think I'm getting ready to close the polls.
Getting ready to close the polls.
All right, polls are closed.
And our results are awesome. 3/4 of you at least believe that there is a single fear that drives this kind of spiritual problem that is common to all addicts. Excellent. Beautiful. Very good answer. Because you're right. That fear is the fear of abandonment and rejection. Now, before we go any further, let me say that whenever I say that to a parent, the parent's first instinct a lot of time is to be defensive. I didn't abandon my child. I didn't reject my child. Time out. Remember that I said the trauma that the addict experiences is real, even in its imagined pain, right? How they feel about the circumstance is completely, vastly different than A, how it went down, and B, how you perceive it. Abandonment and rejection is one of the deepest, most existential and spiritual fears that an addict has, right? And in layman's terms, it's very simple. My fears are about abandonment and rejection, which means on a very base level, it's about not getting what I want or I think I should have, or somebody taking what I already got. And that's my fears that drive me for every protectionist decision or aggressive decision or any decision. I'm afraid that I'm not going to get what I want or somebody's going to take what I got. And that's how I operate my life. Even in terms of like, I want your friendship. I feel less than. How am I going to get it? I'm going to lie. I'm going to change my personality to match yours. I'm going to be a chameleon and morph into what I think you want me to be, right? Or I'm going to protect myself and act aloof. These things, right? These things. If I'm afraid of abandonment and rejection, I have expectations that never get met, which cause me to have resentments. So on the fear side of the spectrum, I'm afraid of not getting what I want or I think I deserve, somebody taking what I have. And when I don't get it because nobody can read my mind and give me what I think I need, I start to get resentful. And on the resentment side of the spectrum is two driving forces that are directly related to abandonment. I get mad at what somebody did to me or what somebody didn't do for me. And with a continuous onslaught of this feeling over and over and over and over and over in my life, which creates this pathology of trauma, real or imagined, I end up at one single state. I absolutely feel less than everyone else. I feel less than everyone else. So here is one last question that will end, and we'll try to finish out another slide, but we actually have two poll questions. So let's ask this one. Do you believe that your loved one feels abandoned and or rejected? Excuse me. What slide are we on, Dave?
50.
What were we going to go to?
57.
You got a little verbose on this one, huh?
It's okay.
Yeah, it's kind of an important piece.
All right, we got a lot of answers in.
Ooh,
Here
awesome.
come the poll results.
88%. Well, thank you. You are brave enough to approach this reality and actually understand that yes, 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 they do. They absolutely do. They may never have been according to whatever standard of abandonment and rejection exists, but they feel that way more than anything else. Anything else. Let me give you a personal example. My parents loved me. They loved me. I was adopted. They would tell me, we chose you. Of course we love you. But there was always that little voice in the back of my head that said, the woman that carried me for 9 months just threw me away. Now, intellectually and rationally, I understand it was probably the best thing she could have done. I don't know what her circumstances was. I was born in a time when there was no open adoptions, where it was a county sealed adoption. But I'm fairly sure, benefit of the doubt, or even just common sense, that she absolutely did what was right because her circumstances probably and most likely precluded her from giving me a life that she wanted to give me, and she put me up for adoption. And intellectually, I know that. The problem is it doesn't make a difference on how I feel about it. How I feel about it. So here's the final question on this poll. Do you think that you have ever abandoned or rejected your loved one? I know this is a hard question. But if you answer honestly, it'll be very enlightening. And the results are in 59% to 41%. It's close. But what I would say is that those of you that think that you did, I'm fairly sure that you absolutely didn't. And those of you that think you didn't, I'm fairly sure that you believe you absolutely didn't, because you absolutely didn't. What I will say is that if you have that feeling that you did, you didn't leave them on the doorstep of a fire department. Whatever subtle version that you believe, know that you can project that unintentionally, and the addict is going to suck it in like the mother's milk of self-sorrow and use it to become a victim even more. And it's not conscious on their part, but it is malicious, right? And that projection is not real, but they feed on it. And you have to understand this, and absolutely this. I'm telling you right now, you did everything to the best of your ability, and that was good, and it was good enough. What happens after the person becomes an addict is that we can't operate on the same interaction, and the damage of enabling and bad boundaries didn't happen prior to their addiction. Now we want to give the same love that we gave before, only now the addict is corrupted and has become malicious and devious and manipulating and conniving, and understands that and uses it to their advantage, and uses that 59% of you that thought you did abandon them to their advantage. If you feel that you have, A, it's not true, and B, forgive yourself, because you were a great parent who did everything in your power to do what was right and to do it with love. And I commend you for that. Don't ever doubt yourself. And you know why? Because you are all here trying to learn how to make this better for yourself, and by extension, for your identified patient. All right, so let's take some questions. What are we
Okay, so I have a bunch
50.
of questions. So I hope you can be thorough yet brief. I know that's
Yeah,
a
not my
challenge.
forte.
I know, but we want to get to as many as we can.
Okay, let's do it. We can stay a minute after if you guys want
let's,
to. I don't have a problem with that.
So this first question has a bunch of questions sort of tied in, but the overall arcing theme is, where does choice come into play in the addictive process?
Okay.
I want to know if there's a choice initially in using, At what point can someone be defined as an addict? And if you continue to use despite negative consequences, is that a choice? So how does someone decide to stop if there is no choice?
Okay, so there is a choice. You can choose to pick up. You can choose not to pick up. Doesn't mean you're going to be an addict. There's thousands of people that smoke weed and drink every day. They're not alcoholics. They're not addicts. There's thousands of people that will go to a party or go on a vacation and gamble, not addicts. So initially there's a choice. There's always a choice, right? Where the line tends to be blurred is that choice doesn't make it their fault. It makes a choice that other people are making with impunity only because of this conspiratorial perfect storm that put them into the high probability of addiction. Those choices have detrimental results that are more detrimental than other people. Oddly enough, when you brought the question up, you actually gave the actual diagnostic criteria for an addict. And this is what makes them an addict and removes their choice and enters them into the disease. And that is continued use despite negative consequences. Because once that cycle occurs, you can't stop physiologically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. It becomes your solace. It becomes your solution to those existential problems. So initially, we all have choices, but those choices are eroded because of the circumstance of the addictive pathology. That's how it works. So you have a choice, but once you continue to use despite negative consequence, that choice starts to fade out. It dereses.
Okay, next question. Is there really a definable bottom, or is it just a click in the brain despite the type of circumstance?
Okay, so what I teach the clients here at RBC, at Recovery Boot Camp, is super important. And this tends to be a personal approach. I will venture to say it's a borderline opinion, bordering on an opinion. However, it's an opinion generated by years of experience, both professionally and personally, as an alcoholic and a treatment professional. Okay, so how do I put this? All right, so there's this kind of weird perceived unspoken hierarchy in the recovery scene that we actually hear minimized because we dispel this rumor immediately with what I'm about to tell you. But at other treatment centers, we tend to see it tends to be cliques, the junkies, the alcoholics, the cokeheads, the weed guys. There's this weird thing. Here at Recovery Boot Camp, we dispel that because of this particular idea. Let's say that you're 18 years old and you went to MIT on a scholarship that you worked diligently for from 7th grade until you graduated a year early from high school. You didn't play sports, you didn't go out, you didn't hang out with your friends. You were committed completely and totally to attaining that scholarship to MIT. And you get into MIT and they put you in a dorm with a bunch of hippie science guys and you start smoking weed and you love it. And even in a short period, you love it so much because all that stress, all that conflict, all that trauma is now alleviated. And you start smoking every day, day. And in your second semester, your grades tank and you get kicked out. You get put on administrative leave or you get put on a medical leave. And they tell you, if you don't get it together, you lose your scholarship, you're out of MIT, right? So here's a guy that has a trauma just from smoking a little too much weed, you know? And some people go, yeah, it's weed. You haven't shot heroin. You didn't drink a pint of vodka. You don't know nothing. But the truth is that circumstance is not the bottom. Because that circumstance, albeit from somebody else's perspective, means minimal. But here's a kid that contemplated suicide because his entire plan in life was dashed in 9 months behind smoking too much weed. So it's not the circumstance. It's the way the circumstance makes him feel. That is the feeling of abject hopelessness. The way I internalize that feeling as incomprehensible demoralization. I have lowered my standards so fast and so low that I can't even bear to think about it. And that can be the exact same feeling that a guy who's been drinking for 20 years and lives out of his car and eats out of a dumpster has. So it's not the event that's the bottom. It's how the event makes you feel. abject and complete hopelessness. Let me give you an example. If you stubbed your toe on the way to the bathroom in the middle of the night last night, I'm pretty sure it hurt, because I stubbed my toe on the way to the bathroom in the middle of the night last night, and it hurt. Who's hurt worse? Well, your brain says yours did, and my brain says mine did, because they both hurt worse. Because I cannot judge how you process that pain physically. What gives me the right to judge how you process pain emotionally? The bottom is the same for everyone. And it's one of the most important concepts that we bring to the clients here at Recovery Boot Camp. We talk about it over and over and over, because the basis of healing in a community is unity, not difference and not separation. And of all the places that I've seen, here at Recovery Boot Camp, we really focus on that. It's huge, right? Because just because your circumstance is different than mine, you felt exactly what I felt, and that's what unifies us together in healing.
Okay, got a bunch more questions.
A little long-winded, but I tried to get it in. It was like a minute. I did okay.
Yeah, it was like 5.
All right, it was like 5.
All right, so we have a couple questions.
Sure.
That are kind of similarly themed. I'm going to try and figure out a way to ask both and get one answer. The first question is from a mom whose daughter is at IOP. Okay. And she's behind on rent and utilities, and she almost feels obligated to bail her out. But she wants to know, I guess, if it's okay to pay back rent when she's been there attending for 1 week, and to keep paying. And is that okay? And the second question is, if my son or daughter asks for money, a place to live, and I say no, is not that a form of rejection? No. How can I handle that?
Okay, rent.
Don't they feel like they're being rejected?
Yeah, see, that's good. But now okay. So, quick question. The person that asked that question, the addict who wants rent, are they in treatment? Are they getting sober? Are they moving through the continuum of recovery? Or are they using and trying to play you because they don't want to work? And
it says they're actively engaged in IMP.
Actively. So both of them are engaged in IMP.
The first person.
What about the second one?
It's just a general question.
Okay.
If my addict asks for money,
all right. No. Okay, here's the thing. So one of the, and again, it's case by case, and we're going to get into it in depth as time progresses. Where is helping and enabling? Where's that border? Where does it go? Where does it go? Where does it go? Well, questions like this: how long have they been trying to get sober? How long have they attained in sobriety right now? Where are they at? When they talk to you, what do they focus on? What they can get from you? Or do they talk about where they are and what they're doing with their sponsor and how they feel about it and how they're really trying to get a job and balance going to meetings and working, right? It's all about the circumstance. And you as a parent actually know your child's hustle, or hopefully that's why you're here, is to learn it and then utilize it, and don't become a doormat to them and their manipulations. So what you have to do is really case by case. You have to look at their commitment. You have to listen to the way they talk. Are there requests, just same old from before? Or is there an actual, and here's another reason why we really strongly do this family weekend, because it allows that interaction to be moderated, to see how someone's changing, to genuinely discern their commitment, that the parent has a guideline, a thing they can keep by the phone. So when they call, they can look at their little checklist and see if those requests fit within that paradigm. So again, it is okay to help someone that is genuinely working to help themselves, right? Really, the whole idea of enabling, where the line draws, is helping someone who cannot do something but is trying and willing. Enabling is helping someone to do something that they can do themselves. That's the bottom line. Okay? And it's not a form of rejection. It's not reintegrated rejection, because the truth is if they're actively working on their own recovery, they are starting and hopefully should fully understand that they are in this exact position completely because of the choices they made while being an addict. Their physical choices, their responsibility. They are responsible for the ramifications of their choices, even though their disease made them make those choices in a way, it's a very complex situation. I hope I got it. It's very complex.
Yeah, so we're gonna go over.
Talk to a treatment
We're gonna
professional
go over for.
who's familiar with your
minutes.
child's case.
Okay,
Very
we're gonna go a little late.
I'm good.
Okay,
I'm late.
so here's a good question.
Good question.
From Leah.
Hi, Leah.
Are gender segregated rehabs more effective?
Yeah, they are. They are. For a simple reason. If one of my deep existential pains is abandonment and rejection, which means that I only feel value when someone likes me or loves me, and you put me in a circumstance where there are people as broken and needy as I am of the opposite sex, the tendency, or even same sex in same sex in like LGBT communities, it's a very tricky circumstance, because if I get my validation from what you think about me, oh no, let me change that, from what I think you think about me, which is an unsolvable conundrum, then I'm going to do everything in my power to get you to like me, which means I'm going to invest the majority of my mental power and my mental effort and my time trying to get that quick pleasure than actually do the work through the pain to get the result of joy that comes from the process itself. Gender specific, sexuality specific rehabs, it's what it's all about. And this is why we here at RBC, we don't preferential men or women, but we have men and we stick with men, because in order to have an intimate relationship, even non-sexual, with someone of the other sex, you have to first have an intimate relationship with yourself. And then by extension with other men, as we do here at RBC or in a women's rehab with other women. And only after you do that, because that's how you develop a true intimacy without even the vague possibility of a sexual congress at the end of it, then you can take that, the template of friendship, and apply it to opposite sexes. Start with platonic relationships that are intimate, and then into sexual intimate relationships. Basically, simplest answer is, yeah, it's a huge distraction. Huge. And I'm going to do anything I can to get out of myself and not feel the way I feel. And if you tell me I'm okay, God, I feel better.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Okay, so we have a mother whose son has just recently gotten sober and stopped using. She has already seen an immediate change of behavior, and it seems that he might be back to his normal self. So what can she expect in the next few weeks, and what can she do to best support him?
Okay, well, first of all, it's a loaded question, because I don't know what normal self is. You mean normal using self, normal pleasing self, normal self when he was 9?
Before the drugs got bad.
Right. So then it also depends on how long they've been bad and what's he been doing and what you know. And I'm going to tell you something that you're not going to like. Since your children have become addicts, you do not know who they are. Trust me. And probably even before things got bad and they became an addict, you didn't really know who they were. Because part of the process of diminishing their moral standard to that point where they outright lie to you is they obfuscate, they lie by omission, they find more solace in their friends. They want to push that envelope, as Maslow calls it, right, to leave the security, get the boundaries, come back and forth and back and forth. But you haven't known your child in a long time, unfortunately. However, you get the chance to know them now, and not the one that they had before. So I would also caution you about saying his normal self, like having an expectation that it's going to be the same child, because it's not. Because the trauma of the experience itself, if they do recover, really adds a whole nother depth of dimension and contextualization to their maturity and understanding of who they are as a human being. So what was the quick question? What should she look for?
How can she best support him?
Okay, very simple answer. Go to Al-Anon, find a sponsor, work steps for yourself. Al-Anon is not about whining about your child or trying to control or micromanage his reality. It's about you becoming sober and mentally healthy in your own right. And by doing that, you guys can interrelate through this paradigm, this 12-step paradigm of spiritual enlightenment and, emotional maturity. And that way you can actually judge the veracity of each other's sayings, what you say to each other. You can judge the veracity of the emotional commitment, and you can grow together. Best thing you can do to help your child stay sober is to get your mental health under control because you caught it from them, whether you wanted to or not.
So this question might be the same. This is from a mom who has 2 sons who are recently sober in the first year or 2.
Nice.
She's still on pins and needles. When the phone rings, she still takes a deep breath and has to prepare herself for the worst. When does that go away? What can she do? It sounds like the answer may be simple.
Go to Al-Anon, get a sponsor, work the steps.
Perfect.
That's it. Short answer. Get a support group. The fact is I understand the hardest thing to regain is trust in a relationship, especially a deeply intimate relationship like a parental-child relationship. The only thing that will alleviate that, if you don't do the work that I suggest, is that it will be time, and it'll take time. And without the work on your own mental health, processing your own resentments, understanding that your own expectations are out of control, this is what you got to know, that your serenity is inversely proportional to your expectations. And if you're just waiting for the cops to call you on the phone, you have a negative expectation that is diminishing your serenity exponentially. And it takes time. Trust is redeveloped and regained over time. Continuum of proactive behavior, continuum of positivity, blah, 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 on the part of the addict, and also yourself. Work on your own mental health. Please, I beg you to do this. This is the best thing you can do. And the other thing, just let me jump back to the enabling question, is even if the parents are separated, when it comes to handling the child in their recovery, even in their addiction, there has to be a unified front between the parentals. Always, always, always. Prevents triangulation, prevents manipulation. Mom, Dad said I could go to the store if you said. Dad, Mom said I could go if you said. Right? That triangulation, that putting us against each other, that's a huge manipulation. And the active addict is really in charge of the whole family dynamic. You should absolutely know that without you even knowing they control the circumstance. Again, get a sponsor, work some steps. It'll change your life. I know you feel that you don't have to do it because you say, well, they're the addict. Trust me, you've gotten tainted by exposure to that reality. It is a systemic disease. Absolutely.
I think we might want to wrap it up there.
Okay.
We have some more
Get a
questions.
sponsor.
We do have more questions, but I think it'd be best if we took some time to answer them in detail via email.
Is there one shorty?
With you, Rabbi Mark?
Yeah, not a lot of shorties.
Yeah, let's do one more, 2 minutes.
Okay, 1 2-minute shorty. Gotcha.
Okay. Pressure's on.
Gotta make Dave do some work.
Okay.
I just talk.
I think we may have touched on this briefly, but I think it's a good one. So, can forced rehab ever be effective? So
God, yes.
One of my addicts or alcoholic loved ones, I force them into rehab. Is it a waste of time?
Absolutely. Coercion is a very strong tool to use to get people sober. I coerce people continuously, all the time. They don't even know it because I'm a really good dope fiend and I can manipulate the crap out of somebody. But coercion and forced treatment is best. And if we look at the nationwide numbers, it's not the best, but it's amazing. Here at RBC, we do all the tracking and we see that people that have legal ramifications hanging over their head, strong boundaries with their parents that say, go to rehab or your ass is on the street. I'm sorry, you can go live in the suburbs because I'm not taking care of you. These type of strong boundaries, which a lot of times the addict will convolute and uses rejection and uses but you're abandoning me. It's not true. He's trying to manipulate you. What's going on is strong boundaries, strong legal ramifications, strong coercion adds an extra level of motivation for them to continue. Because remember, I said that nobody chooses to go to rehab because they want to be sober. They originally choose to go to rehab because they don't want the circumstance they're in. Always external. So next week we'll pick up. Please send me some questions. I think we got a good list. I'll bang those out in emails at the beginning of next week. And thanks for your bravery. Thanks for being steadfast. We love you, and we want to see you next week. Adios.